I'm not claiming to know what Bukele is thinking or planning, and I don't even want to project what he's going to do, but I look at what he's done and I'm drawing a conclusion from that. The volatility of Bitcoin isn't inherent to the technology itself. It's a reflection of Bitcoin going through its phase of price monetization. This is an asset that is being monetized for the first time ever. If people are concerned about financial crime and the environment, go after the legacy system. Go after the current system, which has resulted in all the environmental damage that we see today. Currently working with the Human Rights Foundation as a writer, where I write the weekly Financial Freedom Report, which is a weekly newsletter that we send out, basically covering the intersection of Bitcoin and human rights, why Bitcoin is a tool for our financial freedom. It consistently has recovered and formed, a higher low every, through these cycles of its halvings every 4 years or so. I know a lot of my friends and peers still have very pessimistic views of the future because they haven't found something that necessarily gives them that hope and passion that Bitcoin does.
Before we get started with all the topics and the really cool, interesting things that we're gonna into today, give us some background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Zac Guignard. I am currently working with the Human Rights Foundation as a writer, where I write the weekly Financial Freedom Report, which is a weekly newsletter that we send out, basically covering the intersection of Bitcoin and human rights, why Bitcoin is a tool for our financial freedom. But we also cover all the ways that authoritarian regimes and dictators basically, manipulate money, debase currencies, freeze bank accounts, censor transactions, monitor donations, and a myriad of other forms of financial repression to, stifle political opposition, keep their population repressed and complacent, stifle democratic checks and balances by, targeting independent media and things like that. But my journey into Bitcoin began much, much, much earlier on than joining HRF. And my sort of curiosity into solving some of the economic problems we saw in the world today actually started about a year into my economics degree. So I graduated last year with my bachelor's of economics. And basically, I was about a year into my degree when I started kind of just generally questioning a lot of the things that I was seeing in the world and starting sort of making those connections that perhaps some of the things that we were seeing, like inflation and wealth inequality and really high levels of debt, how could we build a system? How could we build an economic system that didn't have these problems? Because ultimately I was looking at all these issues and it was pretty clear to me that these were sort of stemming from the systems that we currently use. And so I was, before even discovering Bitcoin, very much like looking for solutions to build a better economy that, was more focused on us and the environment, and it was more fair, and didn't have all of these sort of like externalities that were just not working for most people. So, I did a lot of study into like alternative economics and like, new models and ways that we could like fix the system within the system, if you will. But it wasn't until I discovered Bitcoin that everything kind of clicked together. So it was about 2 years into my degree that I discovered Bitcoin during the COVID pandemic. And that sort of was the moment that everything clicked. I realized, that a global permissionless currency actually could address a lot of the imbalances that we were seeing in the economy today. So I fell down the rabbit hole 2 years into my degree. I went in head first. I think the first book I read was the Bitcoin Standards. So I skipped the whole shitcoin phase and went straight to Bitcoin only, which I'm very grateful for in the long run of things. And I just started studying Bitcoin like a madman. Truly, I was just absolutely fascinated by the idea of it and what it could mean for the future, for people, for the environment, socially, and all these different implications for it. I would get off work and I would immediately get home. I would grab the Bitcoin Standard and I would go down to the park and just like read it religiously because I was just so overwhelmed by this new idea and this new technology. And then after about 6 months of studying it, I decided to become president of my university's Bitcoin club, which I led for a couple years. Um, alongside some really great people who helped me run that club at university. So we were kind of breaking Bitcoin into the academic scene. We were hosting both social and educational meetups. So we would do things like lightning workshops, learning about self-custody, learning the basics of Bitcoin, blockchain, all of these things. And that was a really awesome way to get to engage with, the younger generations and engage with the academic side, which I think is something that is happening more now, but was not happening very much at the time. And so that was a really awesome experience. Getting to talk about Bitcoin with students is a really enjoyable time because often they're much more open-minded, and ultimately they're younger. They're a digitally native generation for the most part. I can say myself, I grew up watching the formation of the largest technological monopolies ever, the Googles, the Instagrams, the Facebooks of the world. I watched that all rise, right? So digital money is not a stretch for Gen Z by any means. So that was a very refreshing way to get to talk about Bitcoin, was talking about Bitcoin with Gen Z. But eventually, I started writing about Bitcoin on my own blog, and just sort of posting that out into the wider internet, hoping that someone would read it. I got a decent amount of traction, enough that I made enough connections in the Bitcoin space that I ended up being offered an internship at the Human Rights Foundation, where I started helping on the content team, and then I joined them full time just over a year ago. And started writing the Financial Freedom Report, as I mentioned before. So it's been a long but very rewarding journey. Bitcoin has completely changed the trajectory of my career in many ways, and the way I see the world. So I'm internally grateful, and yeah.
Really cool. And you are one of the few Gen Z guests I have. I think you're Gen Z, right? It's actually, I think there are a lot of, I don't know all the generations, but I think millennials is one ahead, and then there's boomers coming, baby boomers coming. I don't know if there's something in between. There's probably something in between that I miss now.
Gen X, yeah.
Gen X, yeah.
They're literally the forgotten generation. That's the whole thing. So the fact that you forgot them is on point.
Gosh, yeah. What Gen X is what is the age range there? 50 or
Yeah, they would be somewhere in there now. Yeah, I believe my parents are Gen X and they're about 50, so that adds up.
Yeah, because it's so funny. That's the main audience here. It's
Interesting.
47 is, I think, the average, and Gen Z is very few. I have, I think YouTube shows it with 25 or under. That's 2% of all that listen to the podcast. I'm 26, so I'm also Gen Z. And for Gen Z hosts to have just 1% that are as old as him or younger, that's pretty weird for me, but it's nice also, because I learn a lot from my older guests, but also from my older audience. But how it's interesting because there are not a lot of Gen Z Bitcoiners out there. First of all, why do you think is that, and why do you think it's maybe even more important for Gen Z to get Bitcoin than it's for millennials or Gen Xers?
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolutely great question. It's important for Gen Z and really any generation following, whether that's Gen Alpha and unfortunately Generation Beta, which they're calling it. But basically, it's important because, in many ways, Bitcoin is about the future, right? It's about it has an impact right now, and we see that. But I think its impact in terms of financial freedom, in terms of government accountability, in terms of the way it interacts with energy and things like that, all of these are sort of things that are going to play out more so on maybe on a decade long scale. So I think the people that stand to benefit the most from Bitcoin are all those in the future who get to see Bitcoin when it's been around for 30 or 40 years or 50 or 100 even, right? This is the money of the future. It's the money that, and it's a monetary system that we can actually use to properly serve the world, and build an economy from that actually works, that doesn't steal from you, and I mean, yeah, so it's a big part of my work. Before I started really getting to the human rights side of Bitcoin, did focus on like Gen Z awareness of Bitcoin. So that was a big part of why I was doing the stuff I was doing at the club. You know, in many ways, Gen Z has also received the short end of the stick in a lot of ways. That is to mean, you know, most of my friends and peers have been priced out of owning a home because home ownership or home prices have risen so much faster than our incomes or wages, right? And this is an effect of the fiat monetary system, right? And so in many ways, you know, I see Bitcoin as a key to being able to obtain home ownership for Generation Z, because it provides a savings vessel that you can easily invest in. And it is not going to be debased by inflation. You know, one of the big problems is that people are just, you know, a lot of people don't invest in the first place, right? But also a lot of people are just, you know, holding money in a checking or savings account, and it's just being eaten away by inflation every single year. And, it's not really conducive to being able to own assets in the future. And then on top of that too, you know, just like the general cost of living has been so dramatically high. Another issue too is, you know, everybody's going to university and they're coming out of university. And I know a ton of people that have just gone straight back to the job they had while they were working in university, or the job they had before, you know, just going back into their retail setting instead of actually being able to find opportunities with the degree that they pursued. Obviously that is, you know, to some degree depends on which topic of or area of study you choose. But you know, these are all observations that I'm seeing with my peers, and really just as a more general trend around people my age range. So it's incredibly important for Gen Z to get involved in Bitcoin. Like, I think Gen Z and the generations after it have the most to benefit from Bitcoin. You know, right now, a lot of people just think about it as an investment, but I truly do believe that Bitcoin will transform the world for the better in so many different ways. And so obviously the people that are young and have lots of life ahead of them have the most to benefit from Bitcoin's rise to global reserve currency. So people like you and I, and many other people our age, there are a few Gen Z Bitcoiners as well. You know, there's a growing number. I've noticed. I'm pretty active on X, and I'm seeing a lot of like some like Gen Z reveals of people coming out and being like, "Yep, I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm here to like help Gen Z out." No doubt, in part because of the help of both Ella Huff and Arsh Malou, who run the Bitcoin Student Network, which is a global hub for Bitcoin clubs and at universities to connect together and share practices and resources. And so those two people have done an incredible job of like providing a space for Gen Z in Bitcoin, and putting in the work to build those things. So huge shout out to Ella and Arsh and the work that they're doing as well. So, but so what I'm trying to say is, Gen Z has a lot to benefit from Bitcoin, and of course, there are a growing number of us involved in the space, like you and I.
And it's fascinating for me that there is student connections and Bitcoin clubs in universities and all those things, because we don't see a lot of academia being into Bitcoin. And those Bitcoin clubs, those Bitcoin student connections can actually help making sure that the next generation of academia actually is in Bitcoin, and the next generation of academia are Bitcoiners, and we can actually change science to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about awareness, right? Like you can't understand, or you can't use something if you don't understand how to use it. I mean, you can't opt out of a broken system unless you know that there's another alternative, right? So most people have never thought about money in their life. I mean, they think about money every single day, but they've never actually questioned the money that we use. And especially, Gen Z, like, it's just kind of been given, like, government issued paper is what we just consider money. And before Bitcoin, it never even crossed my mind that we could have something else as money. I mean, obviously everyone kind of has that antiquated idea of gold being money in the past, but truly, like, it's sort of this weird realization when you first get into Bitcoin. You're like, wait, other things could just be money, like any good could technically be money. It just depends on the properties that it has, whether or not it's good money or bad money. And of course, aligning yourself with the good money versus the bad money is how you can get ahead. And aligning yourself with economic reality is a very important thing to do. And so, yeah, I mean, like thinking back to fiat money, and I mean, it's just it's not a fair system. So we need to kind of just like question it more and like actually question the money that we use. And I think we owe it to ourselves and future generations to do so, right? To push forward and to kind of challenge that status quo.
Yeah, and this is a really important thing that you just said. Like I don't think that if you just adopt the Bitcoin standard, you will win, and if you are staying on the fiat standard, you lose. But I think you have a way better chance of winning, whatever winning means to you, winning in life when you are on a Bitcoin standard versus when you are on a fiat standard. It's the same thing. Like if you are on a Bitcoin standard, you're walking on normal ground that you can actually run on, walk on normally. And fiat, you're kind of like in this mud that kind of drags you down. You can still walk, but like it drags you down a little bit. And depending on if you use Turkish lira or like the Argentine peso, it drags you down a lot more than if you use the euro or the dollar or something like that. But it drags you down no matter what. So, doesn't mean you cannot get forward, but it's just way harder to get forward in a fiat standard versus in a Bitcoin standard. That's the best kind of analogy that I get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it like I often use the treadmill example, right? Like on the fiat standard, you're on a treadmill that's running against you, and you're trying to keep up. And the best you can do is really just stay still, stay standing still, stay in that same spot on the treadmill. Whereas with Bitcoin, and aligning yourself with Bitcoin and adopting, a Bitcoin standard in your life can help you get ahead, because your savings don't depreciate, they appreciate, which is just like, savings is the foundation for all future investment as well, right? So, and what you can do with your savings is, start a business or start whatever you desire, you can then pursue when you actually have adequate savings and you have a technology that allows you to not necessarily get ahead, but just like actually, like you said, walk normally or run normally. It just provides a stable foundation that you can actually build off instead of building on a foundation that's constantly sinking lower.
I also like the thing that you said in the beginning where you said like you kind of realized you first kind of wanted to fix the system within the system, and you kind of see like, okay, how can we improve the fiat system? And I see a lot of academia actually doing that. I think a lot of academia is like, oh, there's this fiat system, we cannot get out of that. Mm-hmm. How can we make it more fair? How can we make this whole thing better? And you're like, you can try, but you probably won't succeed. And that's a hard thing to overcome when you learn the system in the university, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, part of the reason people are like actively seeking for solutions within the system we currently have is because they don't realize there is actually an alternative out there. They don't necessarily fully understand that Bitcoin is that alternative, that there is another option, an option that isn't just a replacement for the money we use, but also for all of the financial institutions and intermediaries and middlemen within it, right? Bitcoin is a currency. It's money, but it's also a monetary system, right? It's a means to save and transact with a unit that can't be censored or debased. So they don't necessarily understand that full picture yet, that Bitcoin is actually a systemic alternative to fiat. And so they are still, locked in that box, the fiat box, the debt-based monetary system that constantly that requires the perpetual expansion of credit to continue functioning. And so they search for solutions within it. And I did the same thing, and I get it. And, that's a natural place to go if you are trying to find solutions and fix some of the problems that we're looking at today. But ultimately, I don't think it will get you very far in the grand scheme of things. Like these, I strongly do believe that many of the financial problems we're looking at today, especially when it comes to like debt levels and inflation, these are not problems that can be fixed within the system we are currently in. They require a new solution. They require kind of rebuilding a parallel system from the ground up. And that's what we're doing with Bitcoin, right? So,
how do you think this adoption will go forward. If you think about like how Bitcoin is kind of now getting more and more adopted with the corporate adoption, but also like states are kind of looking at it, it's like slowly, is the main thing of like, let's get Bitcoin adopted and integrated in the traditional financial space, and then in the long run, it kind of replaces the traditional financial space slowly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, so I think it can play out in many different ways, and I am not sure which one. But to your point, I think we are witnessing a little bit of what you're seeing there. Bitcoin kind of like being integrated into existing financial infrastructure around the world. In the States, whether that's ETFs and all these treasury companies, and also just normal companies, and nation states adopting it. But also on a localized level, around the world, those who are kind of living more on the margins of the financial system. People, for example, in Kenya, I don't know if you've heard of Tando before, but it's basically someone has plugged Bitcoin and the Lightning Network into M-Pesa. M-Pesa is a mobile money network used across Africa for sending and receiving transactions. It's like very very commonly used. Perhaps it's like that and cash are basically how they transact. And so by plugging in Bitcoin and Lightning into M-Pesa, they've allowed people to spend Bitcoin for goods and services in Kenya, using financial infrastructure that already existed. So plugging Bitcoin into TradFi in a way, to expand its use case and to expand its accessibility. And it's working, right? There are like in Kibera, which is a community in Kenya, there's over 200 merchants using this software to spend and receive Bitcoin. But they're not the only ones. There are other applications. In Brazil, for example, they have something called Pix, which is a mobile money system that over 75% of the Brazilian population uses. It's very similar to M-Pesa in the sense that it's just like an app on your phone that you use to send and receive transactions. I believe it's also QR code based, similar to Bitcoin. And so someone has plugged in Bitcoin into the Pix system so that you can scan a Pix QR code and then pay with Bitcoin from your Lightning wallet, right? And so these are really cool examples of plugging Bitcoin into existing financial infrastructure to expand its accessibility for people that are also like very much on the margins of the financial system, who are fighting against, as you said, much worse inflation than what we have right now in North America, who are also dealing with inadequate access to banking services and banking accounts, and also dealing with governments and central banks that are much more financially repressive. So they're probably surveilling transactions more. They might be flagging and censoring transactions more. So kind of having these workaround solutions that are just open source and plugging into other parts of the financial system are really cool. And I think that's one of the ways that Bitcoin adoption is going to spread most rapidly, and specifically spreading most rapidly where people need it most, right? Like I spend a lot of time pushing back against, the idea that Bitcoin is an investment. I think that is an idea that really only has emerged in North America, in more privileged countries, ultimately, because we have financial privilege. We live, there's plenty of people that live, if you live in the States or you live in Canada or you're living in many European countries, you live in a democracy with a relatively stable currency and functioning legal systems, where you have access to banking services and a bank account, and you can free speech is pretty good as well. You can pretty much say whatever you want, to varying degrees around the world. But when you look on the periphery, when you look on the margins of the financial system, you look at places like Cuba or Nigeria or Venezuela or Russia or China, where inflation is a lot higher, and where financial control is a much more ingrained aspect of life. Those are the places where I see Bitcoin adoption growing the most rapidly, because these people have an understanding of what it means to have money that doesn't work very well. Usually, you look at other places, specifically authoritarian regimes. 72% of the global population lives under some form of authoritarian regime. So that's nearly 3/4 of the world living under an authoritarian regime. Most of these places have weak currencies. Cuba, Venezuela has 160% inflation. Turkey has 40% inflation. Zimbabwe has 85% inflation right now. I can give you countless other examples of double-digit and or outright hyperinflation. Sudan is another great example. So these people are, and all the population in these countries are relying on weak currencies, on authoritarian governments that are abusing their human rights and their financial rights. And they don't have functioning legal systems to push back against these. All the democratic checks and balances have been removed, so they can't even vote someone else into power. They're dealing with a dictatorship, or they're dealing with a place with, elections, but they're all it's really just rigged. There's opposition, but the opposition is in cahoots with the ruling government. They're just there as a facade. It's just an image of an election and not actually an election. And so lots of places are in these situations. And that's where I see Bitcoin being adopted the most, simply because they need it more than people need it as an investment. But obviously you have these things happening simultaneous, right? Like Bitcoin is so multifaceted. People interpret it and use it in so many different ways. It means something different to everybody. And that's one of the things that makes it so powerful, right? I think everybody can find something in Bitcoin that they believe in, or something in Bitcoin that they believe will be able to fix or make better a problem that they see in the world. Whether you care about the environment or human rights or the economy or a myriad of other topics, Bitcoin has something for you in it. And that's one of the reasons I also think everybody's a Bitcoiner, but they just haven't realized it yet, right?
It's a really good thing. And I like that you point out that Bitcoin, just as an investment, is not the most important thing. Like we have, and I mean, Jeff Booth is famous for saying that, like, if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it would also fail as a store of value. I not 100% agree with that. Like I to a certain extent agree with that. But I realized myself that Bitcoin is a really powerful medium of exchange, as I used it as such, or use it as such now every single month, because I earn, I think, 70, 80% of my income, maybe 60%, I don't know about the exact number, in Bitcoin directly. And I also pay some freelancers and some people directly in Bitcoin. So there's some cash flow in my business that is fully Bitcoin, and that doesn't even touch fiat at all on my side. This is showing me like, oh, okay, this is working so easily. I just like send a payment link, get it, and then I can send it there. And yes, there are like things like SAP, right, that work really good, and I have a great experience with them. But you can also just like give them an address, send it to them, and then there's an address, and then send it to them. Like it's super easy. You don't need anyone. If you want one, like it's just convenience, but you can do it just like with your wallet that you can install like on your phone. Like it's super, super freaking easy. And then it's there like, oh, I pay one freelancer in Colombia. I have to use the fiat rails, and it costs me like 10, $20. Then I pay the same as someone else in El Salvador and pay them in Bitcoin, and like, oh yeah, like it's 70 cents. If you do it on Lightning, it's like nothing. So it becomes super, super obvious once you use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange that it's really far superior than that. I know like there's capital gains tax and like what about smaller transactions? Yeah, you have to use Lightning and all those things. But I'm big on medium of exchange. I love it. And I think we're just early. People are focused on the investment side of things. But it's our job to like push a little bit further than what's obvious to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this, what you're describing really is just Bitcoin being superior money, right? Like it is absolutely a store of value, but it is a medium of exchange as well, and a darn good one at that. Especially when you factor in all these new layer twos coming out, the Lightning Network being the most prominent, and the fact that you can send Bitcoin anywhere instantly for the fractions of a penny, right? That the efficiency and the simplicity of that, it just beats anything in the fiat system. And so, yes, Bitcoin has a learning curve, but once you learn it and you have done it before, it's actually much easier to use than any other, a wire transfer or even just an e-transfer. It doesn't require as much information. It's just sharing an address to someone and having them press the send button on whatever open source mobile wallet they have on their phone, which there are hundreds of, right? So it's very accessible as well. I think there is a case to be made, because you are right in a sense that most people use Bitcoin as a store of value right now, especially like the people thinking of it as an investment, right? And I think there is a case to be made for money evolving in stages, starting out maybe as a collectible, kind of moving into something more as a store of value. And it's at that point that it becomes, when it is widely adopted as a store of value, it kind of naturally becomes a medium of exchange as the next step. Because once everyone is saving in something, it only makes logical sense that you then use that medium to transact, because it's effectively then is your unit of account at that point as well. So you're kind of like fulfilling those three stages of money in sequential steps to some degree. But at the same time, there's also plenty of people that already use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, myself included, yourself included. And it works wonderfully as such. And I have been a big proponent of, using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, but also, spend and replace, right? Like if you don't want to lose some of your Bitcoin and you don't want to think about how, you bought a pair of socks that ended up costing you 6 Bitcoin because you spent the Bitcoin on them when, Bitcoin was at $1,000 or whatever, right? Like that situation can be avoided if you just stack some sats to replace the Bitcoin you spend, but you don't even need to do that. But I do encourage people to use it as a medium of exchange because it is money after all. It's easier to use than any other form of money. And of course, it can't be censored. There's not KYC, so you don't have to divulge excessive personal information just to make a transaction, and all these other reasons that it just is currently and will only be adopted more as a medium of exchange.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from CoinVigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing CoinVigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. There's only this one point where I know that most people are not lunatics like me that are 100% in Bitcoin. And if you have a fiat stack and you have a Bitcoin stack, I would just recommend just like spend the fiat, like whenever it comes, like spend the fiat stack. This spend and replace is interesting, but it can be quite inefficient. So for me, it makes sense for people that are already they don't want to deal anymore with fiat. They are just like 100% in Bitcoin. Then it makes a whole lot of sense because then you could just like, oh, I have my fiat, I have my Bitcoin, and if I need some, I can liquidate and like I can. I don't know how it's all around the world, but in Europe and in Austria, it's super easy. You can go from a self-custodial wallet with some service providers to your N26, your Raiffeisen, your whatever bank you're using in Austria. I have no clue what, like there are many different local banks, but I've used them with many different banks and used that service. You can go from self-custody to bank within like 10 minutes. 10, 20 minutes. You just like get a QR code, pay that QR code, and you have the money on the bank within like 10, 20 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, that's super easy. So there's no need for you to hold any fiat. If you're a lunatic like me. Some people are like, oh yeah, I like want to have some safety net in fiat, and I get it. It makes sense. It's also different. Like we're Gen Z, maybe you are Gen X, have 3 kids and a wife, and you're the only income, and like you have to make sure like your family eats, and you don't want to sell Bitcoin at a bad time. So there's some nuance to it, but I get a lot of backlash, and I sometimes get the critique when I say like use Bitcoin as a mean of exchange, because sometimes it's just not practical, you know, like there's capital gains tax, like you have fiat laying around, why not spend the fiat first? And I get it more and more. And I spend Bitcoin and I use Bitcoin as money because I have 100% allocation to Bitcoin and I earn in Bitcoin. Like I'm forced to use it as a mean of exchange. I'm happy to use it as a mean of exchange, but I'm also forced to do it. So there's some, I just wanted to put that nuance in there because different life situations kind of like occur with different challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if most of your expenses are in fiat, it makes no sense to be spending Bitcoin on them unless there's an easy way to do so. You're totally right. It's circumstantial, absolutely. But what you've done is, I can see you've aligned yourself with the future that you expect to see, which is that Bitcoin will be the money of the future. And so if you're all in on Bitcoin, it makes sense to just spend your Bitcoin because that's your unit of account. You're on a Bitcoin standard yourself. And there's plenty of people that are doing that. I think another important point to make is well, I'll start with an example. Like anytime I go somewhere and I know that they don't take Bitcoin, I ask anyway, hey, can I pay in Bitcoin? Almost everywhere I go, whether that's the bar, whether that's going to a restaurant, whether that's the movie theater, like truly everywhere I go, I just ask the person at the till if I can pay in Bitcoin. And the reason I do that is because I want to get merchants thinking about it, right? I want them to be like, wait, did that person actually just ask me if I can pay in Bitcoin? Like, maybe they don't know what Bitcoin is yet. And then that causes them to go look into Bitcoin. Or maybe they tell their boss that and their boss goes, maybe we should accept Bitcoin. If people are asking us to pay in Bitcoin, then why wouldn't we accept Bitcoin, right? And I think that is a really important dynamic right there, because ultimately, if we want merchants to accept Bitcoin, the only way that that's going to happen is if people are asking to pay in Bitcoin in the first place. To some degree, there's the adoption via the store of value and then them wanting to accept Bitcoin. But I think a big part of it has to come from people wanting to spend their Bitcoin. And maybe that doesn't happen right away. And maybe that's something that kind of happens more slowly over the next few decades. But I still think it's a really important thing to do. And also, I've had a lot of fun conversations asking if I can pay in Bitcoin. I've had people look at me like I'm the craziest person ever. I've had people say yes and then be like, wait, did you just ask to pay in Bitcoin? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, no, wait, we can't do that. But they just like, sometimes people just say yes because they think that you've asked, like they think you've asked something very simple. Or maybe they didn't even hear what I said. Who knows? But it always turns into a conversation. It's quite fun to see people's reactions when you ask that. And I usually also say like, well, let me know when you do, or I'm sure you'll be accepting it in the future or something like that, kind of teasing them a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of have a responsibility to sort of like use Bitcoin in the way that we want to use Bitcoin. And, saving and spending it are two different ways to use Bitcoin. They're both using Bitcoin. But I think, there's nothing better than doing both.
This is actually the tactic that used that Red Bull used to get into bars and restaurants. They paid people to go into bars and restaurants and just let them ask, "Oh, do you have Red Bull?" And if they said no, then like, "Oh, okay, I'll have something else." So extremely non-aggressive and extremely efficient, because then all of a sudden they know. Like you can send you can make a strategy out of that. Like if you really want to be strategic with adopting Bitcoin in some kind of restaurant, you just pay off 2 people per day that go in and ask, "Hey, can I pay in Bitcoin?" And do that for 2 months. And then after that 2 months, you come in as a salesperson saying like, "Hey, I have a point of sales device where you can accept Bitcoin." And it costs you almost nothing, and it's super easy to set up, and it has lower fees than Visa and MasterCard. Would you like to do that? It's highly unlikely that he says no. There are so many people asking at that point. So it's that social proof aspect. I mean, it's a lot of. I don't know if the marketing budget is really good for like that one sales device that you get, like some people do it. So it's probably doesn't make sense to pay so many people off. But Red Bull actually did that in the early 2000s, just paying people off like, "Hey, go in there, ask for Red Bull. If they say no, just like get something else." And with that, you, this is this kind of guerrilla marketing of like, "Hey, let's just do it. Like let's do something just unconventional to actually get this thing going." And we cannot pay people off to ask for if they can pay in Bitcoin. Like we could, but like who would do that? So the best thing we can do, just do it ourselves. Like when you're in a restaurant, ask, "Hey, do you have Bitcoin as a payment?" And like, "Oh no," and then okay, I'll pay with Apple Pay. Like that's super easy to do. Like you don't have to be aggressive to saying like, "Oh, then I don't pay." Like
no, yeah,
don't be an asshole about it.
Yeah. You just use the alternative if they say no. Like it's simple. Like I'm expecting to have to pay with my credit card when I ask the question, but I'm still going to ask. And I mean, and like what you were saying with Red Bull, like I mean that's effectively exactly what I was trying to explain. And that's hilarious. I feel like someone's going to watch this podcast and they're going to go and do the exact strategy you just outlined. And then it's going to be one of these POS Bitcoin providers or like someone who helps you accept Bitcoin as payment. And they're going to go and they're going to do exactly that. They're going to pay off a couple people to go into a cafe once or twice a day, new person every time. And then they're going to come in and be like, sell them on a Bitcoin POS system. That's hilarious. Really good idea. I mean, yeah, I mean, imagine if every Bitcoiner in the world right now just went and, wherever they went today, whatever they bought today, they just asked if they could pay in Bitcoin. That would be millions, if tens of millions of people, if not hundreds of millions of people that would just like, it's just like a small nudge. But I think that if we did that, and if we did that every time we bought anything, I think we would get to a Bitcoin standard a lot quicker, actually. But, most people are not going to do that. It can be a bit, like sometimes you don't want to have that conversation. Maybe you don't want to talk about Bitcoin. Maybe you're with your wife and she's going to get annoyed that you're asking the the server if you can pay in Bitcoin. Who knows, right? There's a merit of reasons why you might not ask someone this, but I think that if you're one of those people that's comfortable doing so, I think join me, join Robin, help us out. Let's make Bitcoin a medium of exchange. Let's make it fun to use. Let's get more merchants onboarded wherever you are. So yeah.
I just want to pay with at more merchants with the money I use. It's very selfish of me to ask that about Bitcoin, that of other people. Please ask them because I want to pay for them with Bitcoin. And if I'm the 10th person that asked, I have a higher chance of actually getting the payment through. If I'm the first one, they look at me like, what? Why do you want to do that? But if I'm the 10th or 20th or 30th person, they're like, oh yeah, we got that a lot. Yeah, like we're looking into that. And then like the next time you're asking like, oh yeah, we have a sale, like we have now a point of sales device, like here, like the QR code and like, oh, nice, lightning, nice. So it's just a matter of time. And also, I'm on conferences, and some conferences, the smaller ones, are now opting into Bitcoin only, where you can only pay things in Bitcoin. So that's kind of nice. It's kind of cool to have those things, and just like push Bitcoin forward. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to your point, I help organize Learning Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin education conference we're actually having 1 week from today. It'll be next weekend in Vancouver, BC, on the west coast of Canada. Yeah, I mean, like for conferences to adopt not only a Bitcoin-only stance in the messaging that they're sharing, which is what we have done, we're Bitcoin-only, but also to be able to, pay for your tickets in Bitcoin and pay in Bitcoin when you are buying things from the venue. So, we have all of that set up. We are a very small conference. This is the second time we've ever done it. A few hundred people that come out to Learning Bitcoin. But the point is, like we've made it easy for people to pay in Bitcoin for their tickets. And when they're at the event, anything they're buying from booths or exhibitors is also, paid for in Bitcoin. So we really embraced the idea of using Bitcoin. I mean, a large part of that comes from it being a conference focused on education. So we have speakers and we're going to have workshops as well, where we actually teach people to use Bitcoin, use the Lightning Network, how to self-custody, talking about the history of money and proof of work and hashing and all these kind of aspects of Bitcoin. But a big reason we're doing it in Vancouver this year is because there's over 100 merchants in Vancouver using Bitcoin already. So that's 100 businesses that are accepting Bitcoin for payment. So in many ways, in Vancouver, where there's a really big community and there's conferences now and there's all these merchants accepting it, and even actually the mayor is a Bitcoiner in Vancouver, Ken Sim. He's going to be coming to Learning Bitcoin and doing a presentation to the crowd there, which is going to be really awesome to have like the conference in Vancouver with the mayor of Vancouver being a Bitcoiner. Like Bitcoin, Vancouver is emerging as kind of like a Bitcoin capital of Canada at the very least. I like to say North America, but some people in the States push back because they're working really hard on Bitcoin adoption in their city as well. But Vancouver is killing it. And it's in large part to the community there asking, talking to merchants and asking them, hey, do you want to accept Bitcoin? Or teaching them how to accept Bitcoin. Big shout out to it's all being done through Coinos. And so the team there is helping onboard businesses and merchants using Bitcoin. But it's not just in Vancouver. There's also places on Vancouver Island, which is an island just off the west coast of Vancouver. And there's a place called the Comox Valley. And the Comox Valley is slowly but surely transforming itself into Bitcoin Valley is what they're calling it. There's a group of people here that are going around to businesses in the Comox Valley and asking if they want to pay in Bitcoin and setting them up with the means to do so. So there are already 6 businesses in a town of maybe 80,000 people. Small town, accepting Bitcoin. And it just comes down to the efforts and passion of others, right? There just has to be someone who's willing to put in the work in that area, and it can really blossom into some pretty cool stuff. So I'm really happy to see like that because I'm from the west coast of Canada, so I'm really happy to see like that adoption growing there and seeing people starting to embrace Bitcoin, whether that's the mayor whether that's businesses or individuals. It's just it's great to see grassroots adoption, because that's what Bitcoin is all about, right? Like, I'm not really that interested in nation states adopting Bitcoin, whether that's the United States or others, or even all these treasury companies. Bitcoin to me is about financial freedom. It's about grassroots education and adoption, and building a new economy from the ground up that works for individuals.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I have actually, because you mentioned Ken Sim, I just want to show you this. I was with him on a live stream on BTC session, and this was my local Vancouver fame moment where I was featured.
Oh yeah,
I was featured with Ken Sim there, and it's such a bad picture because we all look extremely like.
Yeah, you all look very grim, and I'm sure you were probably smiling for most of that. Let's be real.
It was a super great conversation, and it was just like such a bad snapshot. But yeah, I think, I don't know if this is a local Canada newspaper.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the Tyee. It's actually a local paper on the West Coast. It's based out of Vancouver. They actually do a lot of great reporting on many things, but it's quite clear. I read this article actually. It didn't occur to me that you were in the thumbnail at the time, actually, when I was reading this article just a couple of weeks ago. And I was very tempted to write a rebuttal because it's just factually incorrect across the entire board. Basically, nothing that they say in this article is true. Unfortunately, it's obviously written by someone that does not have an understanding of Bitcoin. It also pulls heavily from the views of a economist at the University of British Columbia. And he basically, he's clearly a more traditional economist who has no interest in kind of new technological solutions. And so he pulls out all the classic, Bitcoin myths, as I like to call them. It's a Ponzi scheme. It can't work because it's too volatile to be money. It's, damaging for the environment. Only used by criminals, all these, myths that were debunked about 5 years ago, right? Like, none of that is actually true anymore. In fact, it's becoming increasingly clear that Bitcoin is a positive force for the environment. It's helping decarbonize. It's already a majority powered by renewable energy. Name one other industry that the free market provides a dominant share of renewable energy for. Like, that is there's a reason for that, and that's because Bitcoin is naturally gravitates towards renewables. But also, like, when we think about, Bitcoin is used by criminals, also not true. I think it's 0.13% of all crypto transactions are tied to illicit finance, whereas 5% of US dollar cash transactions are tied to illicit finance. So it's not even like, if you were concerned about these, if people are concerned about financial crime and the environment, go after the legacy system, go after the current system, which has resulted in all the environmental damage that we see today, right? Like, Bitcoin could disappear tomorrow and we would be no closer to solving any of the environmental issues we have. Bitcoin could disappear tomorrow and illicit finance and terrorist financing would continue without it, because that's all done through traditional systems. All these things are being done through traditional systems. And then, of course, you look at other things like, oh, it's too volatile to be money, which is also just bogus. The volatility of Bitcoin isn't inherent to the technology itself. It's a reflection of Bitcoin going through its phase of price monetization. This is an asset that is being monetized for the first time ever. It needs to find that equilibrium price of what is it valued at. And right now, it's a free market. It trades 24/7, and there's a lot of speculation. So Bitcoin has volatility because of all of these things. But as it grows and as it matures and as its investor base grows, the volatility will dampen, as it has over the 16 years that it has been around already, right? And it's also worth noting that it's more accurately characterized as upward volatility, right? Like, despite Bitcoin having, euphoric rises and detrimental crashes, it consistently has recovered and formed, a higher low every, through these cycles of its halvings every 4 years or so. Whether that will continue into the future, of course, is yet to be seen, but it has very strong historical precedence in that regard. So yeah, the article could have used a bit more rigor, I think, more academic rigor. I think that I can't remember the name of the person who wrote it, but I think they had the idea of what they wanted to say before they even wrote the article. It was written as an article to bash Bitcoin, obviously. They didn't seem to have any intent on saying anything else, which is fine, I guess. But this is one of the reasons we're doing the conference in Vancouver. So I hope that Jen Say Dennis comes out to Learning Bitcoin August 16th and 17th. The tickets are extremely cheap. We're here to provide impartial Bitcoin education for anyone. We are welcoming of everyone, regardless of your political views and your beliefs. We're here to embark on this journey together. So I invite Jen graciously to come join us at Learning Bitcoin and learn more about what this is about. Maybe hear some alternative views on economics, because ultimately, if you're pulling from traditional Keynesian economics, you're going to make different conclusions than if you're pulling from various other doctrines of economic, like schools of economics, which lots of people also don't realize, right? That economics is far from a perfect science. It's not a science at all. And actually, within economics itself, there are competing theories and models and schools of thought, whether that's modern monetary theory, Keynesian economics, Austrian economics, all of these different things, right? So when people are making conclusions based on, the current system in Keynesian economics, which is, very much built on the idea of government involvement in the economy quite heavily, and, expanding the money supply and things like that, you're obviously not going to like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a check on government money printing, and it brings accountability to governments, so that governments can't just do whatever they want. They actually need the approval of the population. In a world where we were actually using Bitcoin. So there's many reasons that article could have used some improvements, but I guess I'm glad to some degree that Bitcoin is getting coverage in local media. What I thought was funny is that Learning Bitcoin wasn't even mentioned in that article, so they didn't even do enough research to realize that there was a huge Bitcoin conference happening in Vancouver that the mayor is going to be speaking at, right? Like they did so little research, they didn't even realize Learning Bitcoin was a thing, and that Ken Seam would be speaking there. They just pulled from your guys' interview, I guess, with BTC Sessions and the economist views at UBC to create a hit piece on Bitcoin. So it is what it is. This happens all the time. It's happening less frequently, but yeah, I hope I see Jen at Learning Bitcoin and we can talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah, it was fun talking with him. I love the headline. The mayor is talking about economics and doesn't seem to understand what he's talking about. Says professor. like, oh gosh. One last topic before we come to the end routine of the podcast I want to get into with you is the connection between human rights and Bitcoin. And we already touched on it a little bit, but I want to just dedicate a little bit of space for that, because I think it's extremely important and a topic that isn't discussed enough. So how do you see human rights intersecting with Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is perhaps the area of Bitcoin I am most passionate about, because I think it's the most impactful, but also the most tangible, positive use case of Bitcoin right now in the world. Because, and I'll give examples in a moment, but Bitcoin is being used as a tool to improve human rights, to improve democratic accountability, to improve various other like social areas of the world, especially under authoritarian regimes. So, I mean, basically, the reason Bitcoin has implications and the reason there is a human rights imperative for Bitcoin is because Bitcoin is financial freedom. What do I mean by that? Financial freedom effectively is the idea that you are financially free to transact and save and do with your money what you believe to be right, without anyone interfering or debasing or whatever. And the reason Bitcoin sort of is the epitome of financial freedom is because of the monetary properties that it has, right? So financial freedom can only be achieved to a certain degree with fiat currencies, for example. If you're using a government-issued currency, you do not have true financial freedom for a variety of reasons. That's because ultimately fiat currency is centralized. It has censorship risks. It has seizing risks. It has surveillance risks. It has all sorts of risks baked into it because of the properties that fiat money has. Whereas Bitcoin, has really powerful properties, such as it's very portable. It can be taken anywhere with you anytime. It's accessible 24/7. You can access your Bitcoin anytime, anywhere. It's undebasable. Bitcoin has a terminal supply of 21 million coins, no more, no less. Well, actually, technically, slightly less, but that's the nuance we don't need to provide right now. But 21 million coins forever. It also offers a way to transact that is free from censorship. So your transaction cannot be blocked on the protocol level. It's also quite durable because it's digital. It's portable and durable. It can't rust away. It's hard to lose if you manage your keys properly. And of course, it's also quite liquid, relatively liquid at this point. So it has sort of like all these different things that come together to create what I would argue is the perfect money, right? So if you live in a place, for example, in Russia, and you're a nonprofit organization, for example, like the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which was founded by Alexei Navalny, who rest in peace, was murdered by the Russian regime last year in an Arctic prison. He started the Anti-Corruption Foundation as sort of the leading opposition to Vladimir Putin. Of course, the moment Vladimir Putin froze their bank accounts and cut them off from the financial system. So you have a civil society organization. You have the leading opposition to a dictator being debanked, being deplatformed from the fiat currency system with the click of a button. And that is the case for pretty much human rights groups, political opposition, critics, journalists, dissidents, and activists everywhere in the world living under dictators or authoritarian regimes. That is the reality that they face. They are cut out from the financial system before they can even step into it or before they can even take action, because it's such a silent and opaque and easy way for a dictator to silence dissent, right? To silence any of the criticism they're receiving, to suppress political competition, or anyone just critical of them. And so Bitcoin offers financial freedom for all those because of all those properties that I explained before. It provides a way for these organizations and these individuals and these dissidents to keep going, to keep their advocacy alive, to keep the information flowing, to keep transactions flowing. It's a way because they can use Bitcoin to transact without being censored by a dictator. They can use it without being debased, in the sense that, like if the central bank decides to expand the money supply by 50% overnight and wipe out your savings, and you wake up the next morning and, you can only buy a loaf of bread instead of two, or worst case, if you're dealing with that sort of devaluation, it's probably a much more extreme case, and you've probably had inflation for a while, and your wages are evaporating by the week. Bitcoin is a solution to that. It offers an alternative, and it's a matter of people understanding that alternative so that they can use it in these situations. But ultimately, that Bitcoin is financial freedom, and so it is a tool for human rights, because people doing human rights work under authoritarian regimes need a way to transact and save without being debased, censored, and debanked, and Bitcoin offers them that. And so, in the words of Alex Gladstein himself, who's the chief strategy officer of the Human Rights Foundation, Bitcoin is one of the most powerful tools of human rights activism in the 21st century. I strongly agree with that assessment. In my work writing the Financial Freedom Report, we often cover stories of resistance through Bitcoin. These are things that are happening. The Anti-Corruption Foundation in Russia, like I was saying, they use Bitcoin now. I am good friends with Anna Chekovich, who is the financial director of the Anti-Corruption Foundation. She helped them get onto Bitcoin, and now they use Bitcoin to pay their salaries, to pay rent, to get money, to receive donations, right? Like, all of these things are just better on Bitcoin if you are an organization that is critical of the government. And you know what? I think at this point, when we look at the world, lots of people should be more critical of their governments. Right. And so, so basically Bitcoin is being used as a tool for democracy, for human rights, and for financial freedom more broadly around the world. And the reason is because it's a form of money that works when dictators shut everything else down.
I have an interesting intersection topic. How do you look at, I don't know if you have read that, because it's like only since like the 31st of July. How do you look at Nayib Bukele extending his terms to no longer having the cap of like, okay, he cannot indefinitely run for president? I mean, in America, we have it like the 2 4-year cycles, and like after that, we need a change. He now eliminated that with, like not he, but the El Salvadoran Congress eliminated that, which obviously is dominated by the party of Bukele. So basically he did it. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, so El Salvador has been a story I've been following very closely, both for my research and writing. Very pertinent to like kind of this topic of human rights and financial freedom and democracy as it relates to Bitcoin. Bukele first adopted Bitcoin in 2021. I thought it was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. And you know, I was also 21 at that time, so I had sort of a naive hope, if you will, that he would be different. He would be different than other politicians. And that he would bring El Salvador to a better place. And in those 4 years, he's sort of just slowly, I lost that faith slowly over the next 4 years as he sort of passed through various bills and took various actions that just sort of like were just one nail in the coffin after the other. 2025 specifically has been a pretty, it was a really big turn in El Salvador in terms of just like government consolidation, consolidation of power, removal of democratic checks and balances. And I can walk through this really quickly, but basically it really, the big red flag started when he struck a deal with the IMF for $1.4 billion, right? And in that deal, the government had to step away from Chivo Wallet, tightened AML and KYC, know your customer regulations. They made private sector acceptance voluntary for Bitcoin. And they also reverted tax payments back to USD. And so I saw this happen in late 2024. And, you know, when you make something voluntary acceptance paired with not allowing tax payments in it, it is no longer legal tender. Sure enough, within months, there was a reform to the Bitcoin bill in El Salvador. They removed it as legal tender. So they use Bitcoin, but it's actually not technically legal tender. And following that, he issued arrest warrants for independent journalists in the country for reporting on his relations with the gangs, who he claims to so strongly oppose. Then he claimed to be buying one Bitcoin a day, which I'm sure you also saw. An IMF progress report based on the deal that they had struck earlier in 2024 came out and basically claimed that, and I'm not saying trust the IMF by any means here, but the progress report claimed that actually the Bitcoin purchases that Bukele had been flaunting on social media were actually just consolidation from other wallets under government control. So he's just, what that basically they're trying to sit, what the IMF is claiming is that Bukele is just sending one Bitcoin a day from another wallet he already has to the public wallet that he has shared on the internet for people to audit. The problem is I don't trust the IMF or El Salvador. There's not enough transparency on either side of the situation to truly tell what's going on. Though I will say 2 financial executives at the central bank in El Salvador did say that that Bukele hasn't bought Bitcoin since February. So there's like some of the top financial voices in El Salvador are saying the same thing as the IMF. But, you know, Bukele still continues to flaunt the one Bitcoin a day purchases on social media. So there's just not enough transparency to tell what's happening on either side. And then after all this, so it's been a very dramatic 2025 already. And then about a month before he passed indefinite re-elections, he passed a foreign agents law. I don't know if you're familiar with foreign agents laws, but foreign agents laws are one of the most popular laws to pass in authoritarian regimes and in dictatorships. There is one in Nicaragua that's been used to shut down 5,600 nonprofit organizations. Russia has a foreign agents law. Georgia just passed a foreign agents law as well. And what a foreign agents law basically does is it restricts the finances NGOs, nonprofits, and individuals that receive foreign funding. And the idea is that if you're someone receiving foreign funding, you're going to get taxed more. You need to disclose more of your finances, and you need to submit even more financial reporting. Like basically, they want a magnifying glass on anyone receiving money that isn't obtained locally. And so basically anyone receiving donations from abroad. And if you think about this, this is so anti-Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin is about the free flow of money. And, and so much of my work spans about how nonprofits and dissidents can use Bitcoin to push back against authoritarian regimes that are doing stuff like that, right? So foreign agents law and Bitcoin are like antithetical to each other. So that was a really big red flag when Bukele passed a foreign agents law about a month before, and it imposed a 30% tax on foreign donations and a bunch of more reporting requirements and stuff like that. So basically, they're used to stifle civil society. They're used to silence dissent, and it's working. Right after that, the top human rights organization in El Salvador fled the country, citing heightened repression from Bukele's government. And then around 100 journalists, activists, academics, and lawyers also fled El Salvador after the passing of this foreign agents law. This is a sign of what's to come. This is a sign that behind the scenes, behind the social media, behind the PR that Bukele does, there is a crackdown right now on civil society. There is a stifling of critical voices. This is something that kind of seemed like it was culminating towards, but when he passed that law, it became clear that was his intention. And then, of course, within a month, El Salvador's Legislative Assembly passed constitutional changes that allow Bukele to run indefinitely. This doesn't mean that he's going to be in power forever, but considering the Legislative Assembly is, under his thumb, like they are, his people. It is likely, at the very least, it has paved the way for him to run. And if the people elect him, he will be elected. And if they don't elect him, I guess we'll see what happens. That'll be another test of his integrity. But yeah, I mean, I think El Salvador started on a grand experiment. I think it got a lot of us really excited. But I think the actions taken by Bukele and Bukele's government in 2025 and since the IMF deal have been really detrimental to both human rights, democracy, and financial freedom in a country that claims to be Bitcoin country. I think a lot of these things are just antithetical to Bitcoin. So I think people need to think more critically about El Salvador and about governments in general. I mean, I don't mean to necessarily single out El Salvador here any more than any other authoritarian regime in the world. There are actually much worse things happening around the world. And I will say, the IMF has played a really big role in propping up many dictators across the globe as well. So, there's a lot of factors. Nothing is black and white about this. It's very nuanced, but I encourage everyone to, do their own research and try to learn the best they can about these topics, especially in El Salvador, because it just offers such a vivid case study. One of the ways people can stay informed is actually subscribing to the Financial Freedom Report, financialfreedomreport.org. Shameless plug right now. But we basically cover stories like this. We cover Bitcoin stories. We cover financial repression, elections and protests, and all the ways that Bitcoin is a tool for human rights, but all the ways people are using financial control. Dictators are using financial control to strip away financial rights at the same time, right? So, yeah, highly encourage everyone to just do research, come to your own opinions. Don't just believe what any one person is tweeting online, because everybody's just got their own narrative that they're pushing these days. And I think it can be dangerous to fall into those.
That's a really good segment. I might have to clip that one because I think it's I think people don't really research El Salvador. They just see, hey, they have Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin Beach, there's Berlin, and those are great projects. Like they what they are doing, like what Nayib Bukele is doing, doesn't take away anything from what they are doing. So that there's like two separate things. There's one is like bottom up, and the other one is top down. So I think that's a very important thing to note. But it's kind of sad. I mean, there's also this angle of if you are starting as a country that has such a high murder rate and is not just doing good, maybe to a certain extent you have to take radical ideas in there and like take things in there. But I don't like the cuddling to the IMF. I don't like that he's extending his own terms. I don't like those. Like I have no clue about that agent law. Like I literally heard that the first time, so I won't get into that. But like that just sounds also bad without really like researching that topic. So I feel like why, like if you want to restore the country, why does he need to do those things? And maybe there's an explanation to that, but like I don't see it. And it's like I get radical ideas in a radical situation, but I don't get why those things that he did there, and I just heard, make up for like making it a better country. Like I don't, that there's a disconnect for me.
Yeah. And yeah, I do agree with what you're saying. Like, I think that's the problem is like, I'm not claiming to know what Bukele is thinking or planning. And I don't even want to project what he's going to do, but I look at what he's done and I'm drawing a conclusion from that. And I think it would be very difficult to make excuses for all of the things that have happened. The deceiving Bitcoin purchases, the IMF deal, the passing of a foreign agents law, the indefinite re-elections, like none of these things, like he came into power through a legislative coup. Like there's all of these kind of like, there was a lot of little yellow flags and now there's some really big red flags. And I just think we need to consider those when evaluating El Salvador. As much as we love Bitcoin, as much as we love that there is a nation state that was so innovative and forward thinking in adopting Bitcoin in this way. And that seemed so promising at the beginning, right? Like we have to be, as humans, be able to reevaluate our opinions and the things that we think about as new information comes in, right? Like that is what a smart person would do in these situations. But all that said, there are also amazing people and amazing projects in El Salvador doing amazing work, whether that's Bitcoin Beach, whether that's Mi Primer Bitcoin, My First Bitcoin, and John Dennehy, and the work they're doing on impartial Bitcoin education. Like there are a lot of amazing things that have come of this. We've seen amazing things of people using Bitcoin on the ground and circular economies. And people, I see lots of Salvadorans online too who are really happy with the way Bukele has done a lot of stuff as well. So it's not to say that everyone isn't unhappy with him. I mean, he has very high approval ratings. Though that being said, every authoritarian regime or dictator has really high approval ratings. That's actually like, in a way, like I often see people cite that, and I'm like, yeah, but like Vladimir Putin and all of these other dictators also have like the highest approval ratings in the world, right? Like if it's manufactured, then it's like absurdly high. But I don't know. Maybe that is a real approval rating. Maybe that's not. I don't actually know. But it's just a funny comparison to make. But yeah, so like I don't think this, being nuanced about El Salvador's situation, I don't think should take away from all the other amazing things that have come of it and the people and the projects that people are building in El Salvador, and people who have been inspired by what El Salvador is doing and things like that.
100%. I have one question for each and every one of my guests that is new on the podcast. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I mean, everybody kind of has like I was saying earlier, Bitcoin is very multifaceted, right? Like it spans so many different areas, so many different topics and studies and things like that, whether it's history, money, physics, energy, economics, computer science, the list just goes on and on and on and on. So my areas that I come to Bitcoin for and my advocacy for Bitcoin kind of stems from both the economic side of Bitcoin and the human rights side of Bitcoin. So, my background in economics allowed me to understand Bitcoin quite rapidly, and also had me already questioning many of the things going on in our current system, and very quickly was able to see how Bitcoin fit into the economy, into the world that we're currently living in. So, I like to think that I try to blend my Bitcoin knowledge with sort of my economics education, and also, my human rights and financial freedom angle, and reporting and research all into one to kind of, make the case for Bitcoin, on both like a social and economic like imperative. So I think I like that unique view of kind of having those kind of viewpoints converge together, allows me to have a bit more nuance when I look at, for example, countries like El Salvador, but other kind of topics and stuff within the Bitcoin space. But all of that I have learned is ultimately a result of people much smarter than I am. It's a result of countless books that I have read on these topics. And I am just trying to amalgamate all this information and use it in the best way that I can, so that we can, make this world a better place ultimately. I mean, as Gen Z yourself, like, I'm sure you get it. Like, Bitcoin is in large part just like something I have latched onto because it gives me hope. It gives me hope for the future. I don't know about yourself, but before Bitcoin, like, I did have a much more like pessimistic view of the future, for various reasons. I know a lot of my friends and peers still have very pessimistic views of the future because they haven't found something that necessarily gives them that hope and passion that Bitcoin does. So it's just such a powerful technology, and I'm so grateful to have found it at the time that I did in my life, as I'm sure you feel the same way too. That it feels like we have something that we can actually build on, something that we can pursue, and something that we're interested in that can actually bring about the future we want to see. So
that's beautiful. And you brought it back to Bitcoin.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say, man. It's like Bitcoin is life. Bitcoin is life now. I don't know what to say.
That's totally fine. Most guests actually do. Really cool. And that tells a lot about Bitcoin, I guess. But we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, what is a non-essential wardrobe item that you never want to get rid of? Like, what is the wardrobe item that is non-essential, but you still carry it with you?
Like clothes items, kind of, or
yeah, clothing, wardrobe, anything like that.
I mean, that's a good question. I would have to go with my watch, to be honest with you, because ultimately we all have a smartphone in our pockets instead that tells the time. But I love the feeling of cold steel on my wrist. I love the way watches look. I think they're just very elegant, very clean way to dress. So I wear my watch when I do everything, even when I'm doing like active things. I find if I don't have it on, I feel like I'm like out of balance and things like that. So the watch is my essential wardrobe item, even if it's not essential in today's digital age. Yeah, I got one as well. I have a ring on my other finger as well, is all I'm saying. So,
but like, is it like an actual ring or just like a monitoring device like me?
It is. I mean, it's an actual ring. It's actually the One Ring, forged by the Dark Lord Sauron in the fires of Mount Doom. I'm a bit of a Lord of the Rings nerd as well, so I guess yeah.
My ring.
I'll leave it at that. I know it's just fun to wear. It's also a nice little gold ring, so it's a fun thing. But yeah, I guess we can do that on the list.
Awesome. Then yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Robin. I had a really good time chatting you with this morning, and I think we got into some fun topics and got into some of the nuance around, especially El Salvador and stuff. But yeah, I mean, So as I said earlier, the best thing you can do is subscribe to our report at HRF, the Financial Freedom Report, at financialfreedomreport.org. But if you want to follow me personally, I'm most active on Twitter, now known as X, but I still call it Twitter. maybe that'll make you want to follow me more. Maybe it will make you not want to follow me. Up to you. But just can't get that word out of my mind. But basically, yeah, my handle is Zac Guignard. I think you can just find me at Zac G, ZACG. I'll come up. And yeah, I share just my random thoughts and the stuff that I'm doing on X all the time. And plus, I have a link tree as well that'll link to all of my writing work and some of the other stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, just follow me on X, subscribe to the Financial Freedom Report. But other than that, really appreciate you having me on. And hopefully this was insightful listening for your guests. And yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.